Good morning, folks, and welcome to Urban Drama and this wonderful program that you're about to receive for the next 2 days. I'm Judy Ford, and I'm a volunteer here, as well as everyone here who puts all this together is a volunteer. I don't know if some of you, most of you probably have been here before, but this is an all-volunteer operation. And even Dr. Lai, our spiritual director, is, and obviously our very distinguished teacher, is a volunteer. And we depend on donations. So if you're so inclined to help us keep the lights on and the heat running and the air going in the summer, you can help us out with a donation, and preferably an ongoing donation, become a sustaining membership to Urban Dharma, which is a monthly donation. But all that can be done through the website, and it's easy, very easy. We have various programs, and there's a listing on the window of programs, and also you can go on Facebook and the website, which is udharmanc.com, and see a list of the events that we have, and there's a lot going on here. And we have been 12 years in the making, and the state of Urban Dharma is good. We, did any of you watch?
You have to speak a little bit more forcefully.
All right. And the future looks good. But it's one of the things that we are planning, and this is the emphasis from Dr. Lai, is the Dragoon Forest Hermitage. And if you don't know about it, it's going to be a place for people who wish to live in community in the way of the Buddhist monks, in a simple way. And there will also be places for people to come for short-term, as well as people who can live there permanently. But there'll be short-term huts, if you will, not 4-star, but nevertheless comfortable. And
less than 1 star. Comfortable.
I didn't want to say that. Tent platforms, maybe. But there'll be little huts that people who want to come for a short time.
The accommodations will not be the attraction.
The folks, the community is the attraction.
Yes.
And it promises to be really a really good thing. And we also have depended on donations for that, and people have been very generous. So read about it over there on the little bulletin board. And if you're interested in helping us, we can always use those who know how to swing a hammer and, cut with a saw, because there's a lot going on, and we're ready to put up the first building. So it's going to be really something special. Let's see. What about logistically? The restrooms are
Curtains should be
down the hall on the left and right, and in defiance of the state legislature, they're unisex. 2 of them. I think that's it. Most of you are familiar with the Heart Sutra. It's a very popular one, and Dr. Lai has given teachings on that in the past. But this latest iteration ought to be really good. So welcome. We're glad you're here. We're welcoming people on Zoom. Lots of people tuned in that way. So I will turn it over, quit talking, to Dr. Lai.
Thank you. So we're going to begin with our usual opening recitations. So if you have the yellow recitations book, Please turn to page 1.
¿Por qué?
All mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all noises. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. To the top of page 6. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all other sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Page 10. The protector who possesses great kindness, the omniscient teacher, the perfect one, the basis of oceans of merit and qualities, homage to the Tathagata, purity, the cause of freedom from attachments, virtue that liberates from the lower realms. This alone is the sublime ultimate reality. Homage to the Dharma that pacifies. Having been liberated, you show the path of liberation. Devoted to the moral precepts, you are a field of perfect qualities. Homage to the sublime Sangha. Page 43. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountains, four continents, sun and moon, I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all my greatest experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kindness, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings with my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence. Please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment, whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrations, offerings, confession, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching. I now dedicate it all to complete awakening. Om Guru Deva Dhakini Rana Mandala Pratija Soha. Please turn the wheel of Dharma, of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the disposition and mental capacities of sentient beings. Ndriji chanchen tele naroda mami tampo patu chidengo kaden sunden zawe la mesha sakyu la ma yidan chokyong la soba de zada ge jen je lo hong je ye je ne changsam pe ma ge sa tong pu la ye sen chokyong ga dumne pe ma june she she do go do kan do mo bo ko ge ge je se da de ge jen je lo de she so so guru pe ma se de hong kya ben ge do me sam lan gen da pe tong song yong la kya so me ge wan do je chang pa je den kung pe shab la do tu tha tu sam tu kyo le men chin je lo shi tu je jen ne ge men ba sa ne kyang sen do de do pra jen je lo o men yin je ge yi ge bo dan den tu sun san jen kun yin ngo bo ni ran sen cho gung ngon sun tong se pa za wei la me shab la so wa de. Now this booklet, page 1. So we will together recite the Heart Sutra once. Ineffable, inconceivable, and inexpressible is the perfection of wisdom, unborn and unceasing, like the nature of the sky, the sphere activity of the discriminating awareness, wisdom to you, the mother of the conquerors of the three times. I pay homage and praise. In the language of India, Bhagavati Prajna Paramita Hridaya. In the English language, the Bhagavati, heart of perfection of wisdom. Thus have I heard at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling chirping in Rajagriha together with the great assembly of monks and the great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time the Bhagavan entered the samadhi on the enumerations of dharmas called profound illumination, and also at that time Lokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beheld the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and perceived the five skandhas to be empty of intrinsic nature. Then by the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of noble lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom train as in this way? Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should perceive things in this way, perceiving the five skandhas to be empty of intrinsic nature. Form is empty, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness are also empty. Therefore, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. They are without characteristics, not born and not destroyed, and not unstained, not decreasing and not increasing. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no body, no mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I, dhatu, up to, including no mental consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no OH, end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering,
no path, no
wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom, since their minds are without obscuration. There is no fear, they pass completely beyond error and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas by means of their perfection of wisdom, fully awakened to unsurpassed, complete, perfect awakening. Therefore, the mantra of their perfection of wisdom is the mantra, great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that completely pacifies all suffering. Since there is no deception, it should be known to be true. The mantra of their perfection of wisdom is stated thus: Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sangate Bodhi Swaha. The Shariputra, the Bodhisattvas, should train in this profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Bhagavan arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, excellent, excellent, noble lineage, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is, practice this perfection of wisdom, just as you have taught it. Even all the Tathagatas rejoice in him. Having so spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the whole assembly and the entire world with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas rejoice and praise the words Bhagavan. Thus ends the Mahayana Sutra, known as the Bhagavati, heart of perfection of wisdom. So that's the Heart Sutra. In case you missed this, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, which is on page 9, is Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sangate Bodhi Swaha. And so whenever we are transcribing Sanskrit sounds, all the vowels are pronounced. So Gate is gate, not gate. Just to avoid the creation of new, potentially dangerous mantras, it's not Om Gate Gate, Para Gate, Para some Gate. A friend told me recently that he came across a book in Spanish, a friend in Ecuador. I don't know if Gustavo is here or not, but he said he came across a book in Spanish that someone obviously translated from English into Spanish, a compilation of like snippets of Buddhist wisdom. And it included the Heart Sutra. And then when it came to the mantra, it became Om Porita, Porita. Because the translator, read it as gate, gate. It's translated it as Om Gate, Gate. In one of the 8, as far as we know, there are 8 commentaries composed in India to help unpack the Heart Sutra. In one of the 8 commentaries, if I remember correctly, the commentary by Atisha Sri Dipankara. Atisha is a well-known figure, mainly because of his role in the transmission of Buddhism to Tibet. Buddhism first made its big impact in Tibet in the 8th century. Earlier than that, of course, there were also Buddhist influences already. In fact, the official first influence of Buddhism in Tibet, according to the Tibetan history, is when the Tibetan king, at the height of the power of the Tibetan Empire, this king, King Songtsen Gampo, was able to procure, and I'm sorry I have to use that word, but there's no other word, was able to procure 2 wives, one from Nepal and one from China. For Tibet, a relatively kind of a small nation in comparison to what Nepal and China represented at that time, it was quite an achievement. That because I don't know if you know, but in the old days, diplomacy and foreign relations are done by marrying people off, specifically the sons and daughters of the king or the emperor. So the Tibetan emperor was given a Nepali queen, a princess, and a Chinese princess. Both of them were Buddhists. So they brought with them their religion, and the Tibetan king respected that and had Buddhist chapels built. But the real first strong, explicit bringing of Buddhism to Tibet was in the 8th century with a king several generations later, King Trizong Detsen. And then later on, again in the 10th century, another wave, so-called the Second Diffusion, another wave of Buddhism came into Tibet. And it was during this time that Atisha Sri Dipankara went from Western India, from what we today would call Bangladesh, went from there to Tibet. So he wrote a commentary on the Heart Sutra where he said that the Heart Sutra, so first of all, heart is not really referring to the organ, but what it's referring to, it's referring to like the essence. So sometimes this is translated as the heart essence. That means the most condensed. The most condensed of what? The most condensed in the immediate reference to that is the most condensed version of the perfection of wisdom teachings. It is said that the Buddha gave the perfection of wisdom teachings on many occasions. The longest teaching consists of 100,000 verses. That's like the longest, 100,000 verses. That translation into English is underway. 13 chapters have been translated. 100,000 verses on the perfection of wisdom. Then the middling is the 25,000 verses. And then the short is the 8,000 verses, right? Lots of words about nothing. But as we shall see, it's not nothing. It's not how we normally think of nothing. But it sounds like, 100,000 verses on nothing. Yeah? Kind of Buddhist humor, I suppose. Yeah? Then this is the heart essence of that perfection of wisdom. So the shortest. Actually, in this genre of the perfection of wisdom, so in the Tibetan Buddhist canon today, which we have up there, that's the Tibetan Buddhist canon. One half of it is the words of the Buddha. The other half are the commentaries of the great Indian masters. A generous donor from Massachusetts, she sent this set, she sent the money and then we got the set. This is for the future Forest Hermitage that Judy was referring to. There are, I believe, 18 volumes of 18 titles of the perfection of wisdom in the Tibetan Buddhist canon. The shortest one is not this, the Heart Sutra. There's one that is even shorter. It's called The Perfection of Wisdom in One Syllable. But it's not literally one syllable, because it still has the words. The opening of sutras always have, thus I have heard, thus I have heard. So thus I have heard, and then it goes to that's it. So the one syllable of the perfection of wisdom is the short A. A is the first letter in Sanskrit. And according to Sanskrit, according to the rules of Sanskrit, this sound, this letter A, exists in all sounds. Yeah? No matter what sounds you make, whether it's language or just vocal sounds, the sound A is always present. So then this A is a symbol of the topic of the perfection of wisdom, which is the topic of emptiness. Anyway, why Atisha? In Atisha's commentary, he says, everything in the Heart Sutra, all the way up to the mantra, were taught for beings with lesser capacity. Whereas the mantra itself was uttered by the Buddha to communicate to those beings with superior abilities. That means because you're not going to get Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhiswaha, therefore the Buddha gave all the other explanation leading up to it. And then if you don't understand all those words leading up to the mantra, then you have to go back to the 8,000 verses. If you don't understand that, then you have to go further and research the 25,000 verses. I believe the 25,000 may have already been translated into English. And then you have to go back, if the 25,000 you still don't get it, then you have to go to the 100,000. Then from Om Gate Gate Parakate Parasangate, going even more condensed, is down to A. So there is a tradition of the A-syllable meditation. And that is known in Tibet and also known in Japan. There is an esoteric tradition in Japan. There is a Vajrayana tradition in Japan that emphasizes the contemplation or the meditation on the syllable A. So anyway, over these 2 days, we're going to spend some time trying to unpack some of the ideas of this particular teaching, this particular sutra. So although I said that the main topic of this genre called perfection of wisdom is the topic of this idea, this concept, this principle, emptiness, we should not think that that is the only thing that the perfection of wisdom teachings emphasize. In fact, the perfection of wisdom teachings has another side to it, which is the conduct or the practice of a bodhisattva. So especially in the 100,000, 25,000, 8,000, in there, aside from the obvious, obvious topic of emptiness, which is taught throughout, much of the 100,000, 25,000, and 8,000 pertains to the training of a bodhisattva. So there it is said the myriad trainings of a bodhisattva are given, 10,000 myriad, which can be summarized with what's known as the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections that bodhisattvas engage in. The perfection of giving, the perfection of disciplined conduct, the perfection of forbearance, the perfection of joyful effort, the perfection of meditative stability, concentration, and the perfection of insight or wisdom. So these are the 6 perfections. Then you expand on the 6 perfections, it becomes the myriad practices of bodhisattvas. So the 100,000 verses, 25,000 verses, 8,000 verses have a lot to say about the trainings of a bodhisattva. In the Heart Sutra, all of those trainings are given in a very condensed way in here. And what is that? How is that given in the Heart Sutra? It is given in one word, Avalokiteshvara. So an example is given. So Avalokiteshvara is known as Jinrezi in Tibet. In China is Kuan Yin or Guan Shi Yin. In Japan is Gannon. So Avalokiteshvara, the name, the kind of main figure, and in fact the figure that spoke, that gave these teachings. In fact, it's not the Buddha himself that gave this teaching. Instead, it said empowered by the Buddha, Avalokiteshvara spoke these words. So the Heart Sutra doesn't explicitly discuss the practices of bodhisattva, except for the practice of insight or wisdom, which is the explicit topic of the Heart Sutra, but delivered by, you could say, the supreme embodiment of loving kindness and compassion. So the figure of Avalokiteshvara. In fact, in all 18 titles of the perfection of wisdom, from the 100,000 down to the syllable A, the only place that Avalokiteshvara figures as the main person is in the Heart Sutra. So it's the heart. The heart essence of the perfection of wisdom was delivered by Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of love and compassion. The Heart Sutra is an important text accepted by all the followers of what you could call the Northern transmission of Buddhism. The Northern transmission of Buddhism, or if you want to use this traditional term, are Mahayana Buddhists, in which Vajrayana Buddhist is a subset of. Mahayana means great vehicle. What is so great about the vehicle? What is so great about the vehicle is said to be the great motivation. The great motivation. And what is this great motivation? This great motivation is called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta literally is the awakening or the awakened mind. Bodhi is to be awake, to wake up. Chitta is mind, heart, heart, mind. So the awakened heart, mind, the awakening heart, mind. So bodhicitta is what defines whether you are a Mahayana practitioner or not. So in our opening recitation, we recited what is essentially, if you look on page 1 and 2, what's called aspiration and engagement bodhicitta. So these first two recitations is making this commitment, formalizing, vocalizing this commitment. And in a nutshell, what this commitment is, it's a commitment to waking up, a commitment to becoming Buddha. So may I become like you, waking up as a Buddha for us. And the second part is what makes it bodhicitta. The first part, that you want to wake up, that you don't want to be in a state of confusion anymore, it's not exclusive to the Mahayana tradition. But waking up for the sake of, wanting to wake up not only for our own purpose, for our own sakes, but for the sake of all, out of love and compassion for all beings without exception, you now want to achieve Buddhahood. That's what makes that motivation bodhicitta. Now, let's further define some terms before we proceed. Because different terms are used differently depending on context and depending on who you are reading, what you are reading. So better that I define some important terms here because I'll be using these terms and I really don't want to communicate what I don't intend to communicate. So I have already brought up the word Mahayana and Vajrayana being a subset of Mahayana. Then the third word that has this word yana is Hinayana. So there is then Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Hina, in contrast to Maha, means lesser. It even has connotations of petty, small. Small, petty, and then big, great. Now, there is, in fact, one aspect of this which has to do with the origins in ancient Indian history, Buddhist history in ancient India, where these labels were polemical terms, terms that people use to kind of position themselves and put others in. Okay? But we're not doing Buddhist history class here. Maybe some other time we can look into Buddhist history, and Buddhist history, not that different from history of human beings. There are things you like, there are things you don't like. You know? A lot less bloodshed, not completely free. A lot less bloodshed. That much I can say. Without bloodshed, I don't know if I can say that, with a clear conscience. That's maybe exaggerating. But a lot less bloodshed. But when I use these terms, Hinayana and Mahayana, it is not in that sense. So when this weekend, when you hear the word Hinayana, it is not a reference to any existing Buddhist tradition today. There's no Hinayana floating around somewhere out there, much less associated with a particular center, a particular country, a particular, monastery or tradition. Instead, in Tibetan Buddhism, over time, what has developed is, I would say, a holistic, comprehensive way to look beyond the polemics and the arguments and the fights that occurred in ancient India, and to understand all these differences as part and parcel of a puzzle that fits together. And this puzzle that fits together as a road map to awakening, as a roadmap to enlightenment. So even in places where there seems to be some harsh words said about how petty or how small Hinayana is, overall the Tibetan tradition has found a way to bring that in and said, no, you need to look at the context in which these words are said and not take it out of context. Because some of these polemical words that you find will say things like, we were just discussing this the other day, it would even say things like, better to go to the hell realms than to strive for the goals of the Hinayana. Yes, So I was like, what? Right? If you take that on the face level, it might sound like, wait, the implications of that, if you take it literally, right? And you believe that, you say, well, yes, Then the implications of that, when you play out those implications, they don't make any sense. Because even those who think that's literally true, that the Buddha taught that, they will say, however, the Hinayana was taught by the Buddha too. So now if you believe literally those words, then you run into a problem, which is, why would a Buddha teach anything as dangerous as Hinayana, which is worse than the hell realms? Make no sense at all. Make no sense at all. So anyway, again, today is not a weekend of polemics, but just to make the point that over time, Tibetan Buddhists have figured out a way to read all these statements and to read them in a way that they are seen as a cohesive roadmap to awakening. So here then, when we say Hinayana, what are we talking about here? We are talking about the first kind of reference point with regards to how we cultivate the path. To cultivate the path means to bring it all together. So here also even the word path, don't think of it as there is some kind of road already predetermined out there, maybe even in the spiritual sense, and all I need to do is to find that and then just walk. No, the path is something to be developed. But develop doesn't mean, okay, so I'm speaking to you Americans, very practical, very can-do, always figuring out ways to hack the system. By developing, it also doesn't mean, you go make up your own. I mean, you can. It's just going to take a long time. Don't reinvent the wheel. But neither are these teachings things that you just take and believe. They are to be developed, as in these things are to be experienced, verified, deepened. They have to unfold within you. Simply knowing them is not enough. Why do you know them? You know them. You want to know them. You want to learn about them in order to make them turn up in your own mind, in your own heart, in your own life. So the path is to be developed. Right? So in developing this path, necessarily you first have to begin with your own mind. You have to look into your own mind. You have to learn, what is this? What is this? Who is this I? Now, when you explore this question of who is this I, it can go in so many directions, right? And not even I'm not even saying they can go in so many directions in which only one direction is right and all the other directions are wrong. There's so many directions because depending on what you want to do when you realize who this I is, you have to sort of look in different directions. You want to be successful in this world? You have to figure out who this I is in a certain way. You want to be free from dukkha? You have to figure out who this I is in a certain other way. They are not necessarily the same way. Even the issue of mental health, there are some parallels to asking who I am in order to have better mental health, has some parallels with figuring out who I am in the Dharma context, but they're not exactly the same thing. I know this maybe sounds like a minority view, because there is so much of, using Buddhist teachings, using Buddhist practices for enhancing this and that. No problem with that as long as we know they're not exactly the same thing. In fact, growing up in Asia, the popular understanding is Buddhist meditation is dangerous and hazardous to mental health. Yeah, really. But no, it's true. Because it destabilizes your sense of self. Are you ready for that kind of destabilizing? So don't. These are not, I don't say this as like random people or people unfriendly to Buddhism saying things like that. These are Buddhists themselves, when I was growing up, will say, don't start meditation. You're not yet ready. Instead, we were taught a lot of engaging in generosity and disciplined conduct. And you might say, that's just, conservative religion trying to control you. Well, maybe. But if we are not cynical about this, and try to understand what's going on, what it's saying is, before you destabilize your sense of self, and maybe not even a very healthy sense of self, but nonetheless that sense of self has kept things together enough for you, right? But before you go destabilize that, you need to first build a healthy sense of self. And that healthy sense of self is to be built on the basis of generosity and restraint, which is what disciplined conduct is. Restraint. Yeah? Restraint is a kind of a pulling in, yeah? Generosity is an opening. So there's a good way to open up the heart with generosity. Yeah? But you also need to rein in certain other things with disciplined conduct. And they say when you have these two things stable, then you are ready for Buddhist meditation. So I think this is important, for us to understand. When we come to the topic of emptiness in the Heart Sutra, it's like the sword of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. We have an image of Manjushri over in that corner. He holds a sword, And so these words of the Heart Sutra is basically slashing away, cutting all your confusions. Right? Now, many of us will say, yes, love that, the sword, la la la, Theoretically, right? Theoretically. Because when the sword actually comes swinging, most of us are like, wait. Can I keep this one delusion? I really like it. It's like the salted caramel. It's like a doctor says, no more sweets for you. Yeah, but can I keep that once a month? That salted caramel ice cream from the hop? We all want to be healthy, but when the sword comes swinging, we're not so sure. So here, this wisdom of emptiness is not to be applied indiscriminately. First, we should try to cultivate a healthy sense of self. Of course, there are teachings, there are points that we're going to learn this weekend that can help us cultivate and grow that healthy sense of self. So, to do that, first we begin with that level that we call Hinayana. So here, Hinayana has no negative connotations. Instead, it's talking about where you start. And where we can start, the only place we can start is, as they say, Start with yourself. Start with yourself. Now footnote, big footnote. Some of you are familiar with the practice of Tonglen, right? Taking suffering and giving happiness, right? So some of you may have learned that technique. Visualizing, taking the suffering of others, giving them your happiness. Yeah. In the main text where this teaching is taught, there's one line in that text that most people forget. Instead, they jump right into breathing in all the sufferings of the world, breathe out, your happiness. There it says, start with yourself. And you're like, what? What do you mean? So how do you start with yourself? Take in the suffering and give happiness. How do you do that? Any thoughts? If you're familiar with the basics of Tonglen as it's normally taught?
Face your own mistakes, misdeeds, all of that. Admit it, say it, feel it. Actually, is that part of it?
Yeah, and then how do you give?
You change.
Yeah, give to yourself also.
Okay.
That means, and it's developing. It's not being, this, like as the Dalai Lama calls, not idiot compassion. Idiot compassion is not just idiocy. There's also the, desire to be a hero. Leading the charge, And that kind of thing, you almost always have a personal theme song playing in the back, No, don't do it that way. Build it up. So start with yourself. That means begin to find the ability, the strength to accept the suffering that turns up in your life. Don't be so afraid of it. Learn that you can always have the capacity to have that, to stay with it. And not at the first instance of suffering turning up, you run around like a headless chicken. Or maybe you just run around like a chicken, but if you keep running around like a chicken, you get your head chopped off. Then it gets worse. So developing the capacity. Now, this is not talking about, like somehow glorifying suffering. We don't have a tradition of naming our deities, the Lady of Seven Sorrows, of perpetual suffering, or different religious tradition. We say suffering has no value except that it can be. The only value of suffering is that it's optional. Yeah, the only quality that suffering has is that it's optional. But that also doesn't mean, you can just will it away. It means that it's not as solid and real as you tend to think it is when it turns up, and that you can make a difference. So you begin, in this sense, Hinayana, you begin by learning how to make friends, so to say, with your own unhappiness and your own suffering. Again, not to glorify it, unless you're trying to write a book. It seems like only miserable people write interesting books. Poetry especially. not glorifying suffering, but how to skillfully relate to suffering when it turns up. And this, the Heart Sutra, has something to tell us, because some of the insights in the Heart Sutra helps us, right, to make space for unhappiness, for suffering to turn up, from when they turn up. And then to give. Len is to take, Tong is to give. In this sense, starting with yourself, right? To give means, and sometimes this sounds silly, but it's interesting. I don't have to say this, I feel, in Asia, but here in North America, I feel I have to say it. You have permission to be happy. I say this in Asia, people look at me like, what? So I think this is some cultural baggage that we have. Yeah? Some cultural baggage. Yes, you have permission to be happy. You can give yourself happiness. That doesn't make you a bad person. You're not a bad person to want to be happy. You are a confused person if you think just because you want happiness, you can get it. That's also true, okay? Can't mince words here, right? You're not a bad person to want to be happy. But you're a confused person if you think just because you want happiness, you deserve it. You can get it. It doesn't come so easily. But it's also not that hard, Once some basic understanding shifts, then there is the possibility of practice helping. And that's why I think one of the strengths of the Tibetan tradition, and I'll also talk about the weakness there. One of the strengths of the Tibetan tradition is giving a place and developing the skills of giving very detailed teachings and discussions about these matters. There's a strong scholastic tradition where categories and divisions and reasoning and logic is brought in. And for what purpose? So here is important. Not for the purpose of mastering the material. Yeah? Mastering the material for what reason? Well, the way they teach it, in these seminaries is mastering the tradition so that you can teach other people. And sometimes it's mastering it so that you can show off. Yeah? There is that element, Yeah, humans are humans anywhere, right? But the real purpose is so that we can make these, what we're talking about, through reasoning in this way, learning and reasoning and contemplating, we can make some shift on this more fundamental level and then apply the practice becomes effective. Simply jumping into the practice without making some of this more basic shifts in understanding, practice might only deepen your misconception that you already have. It's like, I already know basically how things work. I just need to practice now. Yeah, I told the story, right? Some of you heard this before. A story that one of my professors told us when I started graduate school. I did graduate school in University of Virginia, and at that time, one of the key figures in the dissemination of scholastic Buddhism in the West, Professor Jeffrey Hopkins was a professor there. And he told a story of of one of his teachers, Tibetan teachers, told this story to them. That right after the Tibetans came into exile to India, some of these greatest minds of Tibet, and these logicians really, scholar monks, one day through the Dalai Lama's government, was introduced to an Indian scholar, also monk, but in the Jain tradition, not Buddhist. And this scholar monk approached the Dalai Lama's office and say, I want to learn from your brightest and most well-trained scholar monk about this teaching on emptiness. So they assigned this particular scholar monk to teach this Jain scholar monk. So everything was going well through a translator. Going well, and the Tibetan scholar monk will say, wow, this Jain monk, is really understanding like this whole point about emptiness, the lack of self. Now, I don't know how much you know about Jainism, but one of the central tenets of Jainism is like every one of us have a true self. And they call that true self jiva. And at the risk of misrepresenting Jainism, the seems like the main point is jiva needs to be freed from material constraints. And so the ideal way for a Jain follower to die is to stop eating and drinking, because that's materiality. Yeah, so one extreme example of how that is actually practiced. So they look forward in a way to when you have a natural death and you can just withhold food and drink, with the understanding that food and drink will add to materiality. Yeah? So you need to free this jiva from the constraints of material stuff. So that's one of the central tenets, that each of us have this jiva. So one day, this Jain monk came and, like towards the end of this tutoring, he goes, aha, I got it now. And so the Tibetan teacher was like, oh, yes, you got it. What did you get? He was like, finally, he says, all these years, through studying my own tradition, through so many other means, I never have the experience of this jiva. Today, I've had the experience. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. And this Tibetan teacher was like, what? It should be, in conclusion, there is no self, divine or not, eternal or not. So he already had some prior commitments to what he was looking for, And we all do. So let's not think, that guy, We all do. We already have some prior ideas about what we're looking for. But is that what the Buddha wants us to see? Is that what awakening entails? Necessarily, we come to this with some idea of what we're looking for sure. But as I used to tell the college students that I taught, I said, that you find that this is answering some of your questions, is maybe good, but only good to a certain point, as in it will make you continue to engage this material. But real progress comes when not so much that this is answering your questions, but you find that now you are formulating new questions. Otherwise, it's simply reinforcing what you have already decided to be true. You know? So when we learn the Dharma, we have to keep this in mind. So through kind of engaging this material and beginning to kind of shift, move some of these basic questions that we're asking. That is what we mean when we say you necessarily have to begin with yourself. Look into your own experience, your mind, your heart. Ask skillful questions. Engage in skillful probing. What is this I? Lay aside, really, theories about I. Even Buddhist theories. And don't let what you're going to learn here become another false god, so to say. Do not worship false gods. Right? Don't let this become a new set of theories. But learn how to skillfully take these teachings to begin to change the way we relate to things, the way we understand things. So you begin on that personal level, you begin on that so-called Hinayana level. Then when you see that for yourself, then you begin to understand the plight of all others. Then you begin to see that one in comparison to infinity minus one, who is more important? What's more important? One and infinity minus one. What's more at stake? What's more at stake? It's not a trick question. Well, it is a trick question, actually. If you are honest, you will say one. If you're honest, you would answer one, because that one is me. Conceptually, infinity minus one is more important. On the gut level, it's one. So this is the transition from merely Hinayana to Mahayana. So when you make that bodhicitta vow, the other day I just said, it's basically you are certifying yourself as, clinically insane. That's the bodhisattva vow. It's a ceremony for certifying that you are insane. Because you are saying, for the sake of all beings. Yeah. But you see, on another level, we get it. Maybe intellectual, but I think more than that. On a deep level, we get it. Infinity minus one is more important than one. And maybe even on another level, we get it that infinity minus one and one is not two. That either we are together or not. that there's no choice here. There's only the semblance of choice. That I can get myself scot-free and that's good enough. That we know on a deep level that is not true, cannot be true. And that's why this Mahayana motivation, they say, it's not actually a contrived motivation. Although many of us have experienced on many occasions that, that's just some intellectual nice idea that I adopted for a short time. Right now I can only take care of myself. I'm only interested in my own welfare. But according to the Mahayana teachings, they say actually this motivation, this vow, this aspiration that we make is not actually something contrived. It's actually rooted in our very being, which is what we call Buddha nature. Our nature is Buddha, according to Mahayana. Our nature is awake. So even that problem, right, that earlier problem I alluded to, inability to accept suffering, inability to be comfortable with suffering, from this perspective, that is sometimes given as an evidence that by nature we are not, our nature is not suffering. If our nature was suffering, then right now we would all be very comfortable with suffering. But no matter how much we suffer, we never get used to it because that's not our nature. So our nature is, in this vocabulary, we say our nature is Buddha. Or you could say our nature is divine. And the Bodhisattva vow is merely a temporary thing that we do to affirm our deepest wish or desire. So we are all Buddhists. All beings are Buddhists. So the Mahayana, at the heart of Mahayana is this bodhicitta. Vajrayana, the third of these yanas, is the yana or is that level of our maturing. So these are, right, degrees of us kind of developing and maturing. So Vajrayana, again, is not referring necessarily at all to certain iconography, certain deities, certain practices, but rather it's more on the essence level is talking about. So one of the common phrases you find in Vajrayana is they talk about how in Vajrayana you take the result as the path. Whereas in non-Vajrayana, path is cause, path is path, result is result. Path is here, result is over there. In Vajrayana, it says the result is skillfully taken as the path. So what does that all mean, right? Beyond all these technical things, terms that you might have memorized. Yeah? It means that our nature as Buddhas are constantly being used as the method to change our present experience. It doesn't mean that, right now I'm practicing Vajrayana, I'm already a Buddha. But what it does mean is understanding that we are Buddhists, although right now our situation is covered with layers and layers and layers of confusion. But even in the midst of all of this, I'm able to take that and apply that truth to make a difference right now. In the non-Vajrayana context, it says it takes 3 incalculable eons. From the time you first generate bodhicitta, it takes 3 incalculable eons to become a full and complete Buddha, like Shakyamuni, like Siddhartha, like Gautama. 3 incalculable eons. It's a long time. 1 eon is long enough, but this is not just an eon, this is incalculable. And what is and how long is an incalculable eon? It's eon to the power of 3. How long is 1 eon? Really long. That will take 3 incalculable eons. And when you take the bodhicitta vow, you're saying, this goal that takes 3 incalculable eons, I am committing myself to it. So sometimes I ask people, do you have 30 years to put into this? They're like, 30 years? Don't you know how old I am? I'm like, yeah, but what's your point? I'll ask a 15-year-old the same question. I'll ask a 75-year-old the same question, and it means the same thing. And I'm not asking you a logical question, I know that. But I am asking, do you have 30 years? Because 3 incalculable eons mean nothing to you. 30 years is close enough. So first you have to genuinely say, from your heart, so it cannot be faked. You have to genuinely develop the ability to say, yes, I have 30 years. Okay, now luckily in the Vajrayana, you don't need to wait for 30 years to experience some of the possibilities. You can begin to take some of the fruits, some of the results, and make it part of your path, part of your process. So these 3 yanas don't refer to 3 types of Buddhism, much less 3 denominations, much less 3 different centers, It's like, practice 3 yanas. Okay, in the morning, I'm going to go to this center. Then at noontime, I'm going to go to this center. And you do these Vajrayana stuff in the evening, right? Perfect. I'm going to come for that program, Yeah. And then there's this idea that Hinayana, like Theravada is Hinayana. No, it's not, So some people even think, in the morning I'll go to the Theravada meditation, afternoon I'll go do some Thich Nhat Hanh, and nighttime I'll come do some smells and bells Buddhism, and now I'm practicing the 3 yanas. No, now you'll just be very confused. There's no confusion if you understand, all the different vocabularies used, the different methods, and I'm not saying you can't literally do what I just described, you can. But there's a risk of not understanding how each group is using certain words, certain ideas, then, you keep yourself very busy, but you're not going to grow much. But these 3 yanas can be found. I would say if you know how to look, you can find it in any Buddhist tradition. and even non-Buddhist tradition, if you know how to look. These three elements are there. And so, with that understanding, the Heart Sutra has these three jhanas. Although the explicit meaning of the Heart Sutra belongs to the second, Mahayana, but it works on it uses the approach of negation, right? In case you have not noticed, even if this morning was the first time you encountered the Heart Sutra, you must have noticed there's a lot of negation going on. No, 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 no. Right? What is it negating? It's negating these categories, these terms, these levels. All those terms, levels, they all belong to the Hinayana. But to negate is not to put down. To negate is to say, to look deeper into what these categories are. So before you can negate, right, you have to look at what these categories are. So there, the five aggregates, the six senses, the six sense objects, and the six consciousnesses, the 12 links of interdependent arising, the Four Noble Truths, all of those are taught in the Heart Sutra. Then when we get to the mantra, that's the Vajrayana. So Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana can be found in this one text. So that's what we will spend some time looking at. Yeah? Now, questions, comments.
Do we have a functional English translation of the mantra?
Functional translation of the mantra in English. It's quite literal. It's going, going. So gate is to go. Related to gacchami, to go. Like to go for refuge. Gacchami. So it's just go. You know? Go, go. Gone, gone, gone beyond, completely gone beyond. But of the 8 commentaries, only one of them care to even explain what it is. The rest are not concerned about it. In Asia, I get a variation of that question. Not what the mantra means. What does the mantra do? In the West, almost always, what does it mean? Cultural differences. Yes?
Could you answer that? What does it do?
Oh, what does it do? Yeah. It makes you a Buddha. If you have the capacity. Otherwise, it'll turn into gate, and gate needs locks and unlocking. Gate, locked gate, lost key, can't go through.
Yeah. The Diamond Sutra related to this is the one that has 7,000 7,000 or 8,000?
No, less. It doesn't have that many. It's part of perfection of wisdom, of Diamond Sutra. It's also a Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom text. Yeah. Yes?
If there's no self in the example you're talking Jainism, what I was gathering was there's no true self. And when you reincarnate, what is that essence?
You don't need
There's no quality to it.
huh?
There's no quality to
Yeah, so basically the age-old question, if there is no self, what is it that reincarnates, you know? The river has continuity. River has no self.
it. But a river has quality.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, of course. So your continuum and my continuum are not the same continuum. But when you go looking for an owner, there is no owner. Yeah, so Buddhist understanding of karma, of continuity, it's not as simple as the kind of conventional understanding of rebirth, reincarnation. In fact, technical term, we don't use the word reincarnation. Incarnation, to start with, is a loaded Christian idea. God incarnate, right? So God, of course, is real. So when God is incarnated, there's something very substantively there. And so then, to accommodate Western, Eastern ideas, right, we put reincarnate, you know. But we talk about rebirth. Yeah, that's the technical term. Re-becoming. Well, so what is becoming is the qualities of our actions continues. So that our actions of body, speech, and mind becomes very important. So there are many levels why the difference is important to understand. Because the Buddhist critique, right, of incarnation is that then how is the qualities of your actions related to this thing that is reincarnated? Are they the same or are they different? So putting aside, you know, like metaphysical questions, which I would submit that the Buddha was fundamentally not interested in metaphysics. The Buddha was interested in the lived experience of what this is. So to the Buddha, the language of a soul, of an unchanging soul that goes from life to life, is an abstract. He says, however, when we act, whether it's mental, emotional, or verbal actions or physical actions, these actions produce results. These results can be experienced. Now you would go, you know, like you're using an intellectual gun and point at the Buddha, aha, experience. Who is that, you know? The Buddha will say, that doesn't matter. But what I want you to focus on is how your world, your identity is constantly being shaped by decisions that you make. Decisions that you make that then turn into actions. And actions produce realities. And that's the reality that goes on continuously. And left to its own devices, the realities that we create are often tainted by the poisons, the afflictive emotions. Yeah. Yes?
You were talking about tongue a while ago, and you said first, basically, take care of yourself. How would you define a healthy sense of self?
A healthy sense of self, right. So the question about Donglen, basically, in a nutshell, it seems like what it's saying is first take care of yourself, yes. So yes, take care of yourself. So a few things we could say about that. Take care of yourself, but take care of yourself so that Tonglen is actually a Mahayana practice, right? Is taking care of yourself grounded in this greater view that only when I learn how to skillfully take care of myself can I really take care of others, right? So that's what makes it more than just self-care, right? Self-care situated in, contextualized by the ability to care for all, right? So that's the first point. Then more to the point of your question is this notion of a healthy sense of self. What is a healthy sense of self? In simple terms, in broad terms, a self that is built on the principles or built on the qualities of, as I said, generosity and disciplined conduct. Yeah? A sense of self that is built on that basis. What does it look like? It probably would look differently for each person. It's not that specific. Yeah, but if you begin to cultivate generosity, not just with stuff and money, generosity of spirit, generosity of presence, generosity of, on all levels of that. And you practice disciplined conduct, restraint, so that you minimize causing harm in the world, right? So as I said, one is limiting, and so if you do that, without this generosity, it gets too tight. And then if you are generosity, then it also can get into mischievous places. No boundaries, So what the Buddha gave, really, it's not do one and to the exclusion of others. It's a comprehensive system. Yeah? So when you begin to do that, that healthy sense of self turns up. Then we have the then we have the ideal place to begin to poke that healthy sense of self. So let's put it in common terms, When you are in a good place, right? And somebody tells you, "Oh, I've not seen you for a while. Have you put on weight?" When you're in a good place, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm working on it." When you're not in a good place, what? Same, It causes so much, You get defensive, Same with when we want to transform this, If you go poke holes when it's not feeling good yet, And then like with the dog, if it feels threatened, right? It's just going to become dangerous. Gain its trust, work with it. Then it becomes workable. Yes?
You used the term deity earlier on.
Uh-huh.
How do we apply that?
Yes, deity, right. So that's Vajrayana vocabulary. And that's simply Buddhist. Yeah, Buddhist. Divine in that sense. Buddhist. Yes, I often joke, especially in like Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah, being that first it's Buddhism, next is Tibetan Buddhism. For a non-theistic tradition, we sure have a lot of gods. Running around, lurking around. Every corner, there is one of them. Or one group of them. And so at the end, when we say non-theistic, what do we mean, We're not really having fights with, Allah or Jehovah. We're not picking fights with, anyone's gods. When we say that the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma is non-theistic, fundamentally we're saying a couple of things. One, whatever happens, whatever turns up, is not due to a single cause. Because the notion of deity often is associated, at least in this context, with the idea that there's a single cause. And often that single cause is someone else. Whether it's God with the capital G, or, that neighbor that just moved in that you hate, or the girlfriend that you just met that you love, single cause. You think happiness comes from a single cause, and the cause is out there. Yeah. So that's the critique of theism. So non-theistic is not talking about whether there are supernatural beings or not, whether there are beings that I can't see or not. That you can be agnostic about, or you can subscribe to the whole 9 yards, come every Sunday morning. We smoke out a whole bunch of deities and spirits and gods and door god, road god, this god, that god, That I would say you can be agnostic about, doesn't require you to subscribe to practice the Dharma. But to properly practice the Dharma, you have to accept and develop this understanding of the non-theistic position, which is to stop thinking, working, operating, expecting this idea of a single cause. And then the second point, the single cause is outside. The single cause may even be, these days, in a sophisticated way, understood as no rhyme or reason, which is actually our kind of secular humanist default position. Things just happen. The Buddha says, nah, things don't just happen. Even that is a subtle form of theism. A god that behaves with no rhyme or reason, like the Greek gods. Most Buddhists experience and encounter and engagement with the Heart Sutra is actually on the level of reciting the Heart Sutra and its mantra. It's not often that the Heart Sutra is a topic of study the way we're doing it now. And so there are 8 Indian commentaries. There's more Tibetan commentaries. Certainly a lot of Chinese and Japanese and Korean commentaries. But it's in the big picture, the Heart Sutra wasn't a standard text that is taught, extensively. Instead, people experience this, practice this, and I would say embody this primarily through the recitation of it, chanting it, whether the whole sutra or the mantra. It is said that in his biography, one of the great Chinese monks who went to India, Xuanzang, and in order to study Buddhism and to bring back new texts to which he then spent the rest of his life translating. He lived in the 900s, something like that, I think, or 800s. Went from China to India. It's said that he talks about how on the journey he was captured by a group that he thought, we don't know, was going to offer him as a human sacrifice to their deities. So in these barbaric lands between China and India. And it said that he then chanted the Heart Sutra, and he attributes his safe escape from some miraculous thing happened, and then he was released. So many stories like that about people chanting the Heart Sutra to escape danger. Yeah, so it's not just lofty spiritual ideas that we normally think of spirituality, but it has this very practical side, which may or may not resonate with you, and that's okay, But I would be remiss if I gave the impression that most people who treasure this text treasure it because of its philosophy. Of course, they understand the general contours, and they would say, and that is why the words in the sutra is powerful, because it's related to the kind of the content. But even the container, the words, have great power. So I'm going to end our morning session with one story in the Japanese, coming from the Japanese tradition about the Heart Sutra. So it said that there was this one boy who, I think, he was blind, and he made a living out of his ability to, this is in medieval Japan, he made his a living out of his ability to entertain, and to entertain by reciting, by telling this tale. So in Japanese culture, there are lots of, like these long classics, talking about the exploits of the samurai class, the warlords and all that. So he specialized in the performance as a blind person. So one day, a customer in the evening came to him and say, "My master would heard about your reputation and would like to employ you to tell the whole story, which will take many nights." So the boy was really excited. He was like, "Wow." And he said, "But the thing is this, might be a little inconvenient for you. My master is busy daytime, so only available in the evenings. So every evening, we'll come bring you, and you go perform. And, right around before daybreak, is when my master will be busy again." So the boy thought, it's worth it, I can sleep in the daytime. So he goes, and he goes, and he goes. So every night he would go. And his audience are all very excited and, clapping and everything. And eventually, a neighbor who happens to be a Buddhist monk is noticing this odd thing, where this boy would go out every night. And so the monk got curious. One day, he followed the boy, and he sees the boy going to a graveyard. It's like, what's going on? So then he meditated, and it said that he then was able to see what was going on, which is that the boy has been performing for a group of dead samurais and their warlord. And then he understood that once the boy finishes, they're going to take the boy. They're going to kill him. So he had to intervene. So he went and told the boy the next morning, "You're in great danger." And so the boy panicked and says, "What should I do? Should I run away?" It's like, "No, you can't run away. They'll find you wherever you go." And I said, "But tomorrow is the finale." The boy said, "If I go, you said they're going to kill me. What do I do?" And he said, "Okay, I have one solution. So tomorrow, before the usual time they come pick you up, you come to my temple an hour or two before that." So then the boy comes, and the monk was reciting the Heart Sutra. And the whole day he was reciting the Heart Sutra. And then finally, He told the boy, okay, now take off all your clothes. The boy said, what? Say, yes, take out all your clothes. And he did. And then the monk took an ink and brush. And as he's reciting the Heart Sutra, he writes the whole Heart Sutra. Like on the body of the boy, covering his whole body with the words of the Heart Sutra. And said, okay, put the clothes on. And then he told the boy what to do. So the boy again went, this time really terrified. So then he told, then the finale, and right at the finale, and these spirits, these ghosts were going to kill him. The boy threw off all his clothes and he disappeared. So this is the reverse invisibility cloak. He also became invisible, but apparently the monk missed the right ear, ran out of characters. And so they chopped off the boy's right ear and the boy was able to escape. This is the power of the Heart Sutra. And so in Japan today, it's like the Heart Sutra turns up everywhere. And there are all these amulets that you hang in your car, you put on your keychain, it's on the mug, it's on the t-shirt, tattoo, I suppose, Heart Sutra. Yeah. So the power of the Heart Sutra literally rendered the boy empty. And he escaped that calamity.
Did he reappear somewhere else or only his ear?
They got his ear.
Yeah, how long did he stay invisible for?
No, then the spirits were dispelled, They were satisfied with that, Yeah. Please turn to page 12. Bottom of page 12. Deyada Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhiswaha Deyada Om Gate Te paragate parasangate bodhiswaha deyata om gate gate 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 paragate parasangate bodhiswaha deyata gate paragate parasangate bodhiswaha deyata om gate paragate parasangate bodhiswaha deyata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhiswaha deyata om gate gate paragate ga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te raga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha te yata ga te paraga te parasangha te bodhisoha. Namo Homage to the Guru, homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha, homage to the Great Mother, perfection of wisdom. May my true words be accomplished just as Indra, Lord of the gods, all Maras by relying on contemplating the profound meaning of perfection of wisdom and reciting these words. Two, by relying on contemplating the profound meaning of perfection of wisdom and reciting these words, reverse all Maras. May they be destroyed, may they be pacified, may they be totally pacified. Whatever is arisen, non-conditions is without cessation, without arising, without annihilation, without permanence, without coming, without going, without distinction, without identity, peaceful, free from fabrications. Homage to the sublime words of the perfect Buddha. I want to acknowledge not only all of you here physically in this room, as well as all of you joining us from all different places through Zoom. Then in particular, there's a satellite group meeting as a group in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hello, all of you. So we have done it in such a way that we have muted all of you and not allow you to unmute yourselves, because people accidentally sometimes unmute and there's stuff going on in the background. But when it comes to question and answer, please raise your digital Zoom hand, and then we will then unmute you so that you can ask or comment, okay? So thank you so much. We'll take a break for an hour and a half. And so here in New York time is 12. We will meet back at 1:30. Yeah? And today we'll end at 4. And also for those of you who are unfamiliar or forgot, tonight time changes. For most of us in the US, it's spring, so we spring forward an hour. So tomorrow, please remember, we spring forward an hour. But these days, I think we all have our phones and our digital, so we tend not to have a problem as compared to the old days. Yes, please.
Just wanted to say that there's a custom to offer dana to the teacher, and we will have a kata offering tomorrow afternoon as well as this afternoon. If you are attending both today and tomorrow, you can offer your dana tomorrow. If you're not going to be here tomorrow, please offer it today. And we'll have katas in a basket over on the counter if you didn't bring one. So,
Kata is basically a silk scarf, which the Tibetans developed out of their context to represent garlands of flowers. But no flowers grow in most of Tibet. So they adapted it by using these silk scarves. So that's what katas are. So we will have a break for an hour and a half, then we'll continue.
thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Ta-ta.